Welcome to another edition of Working on the Range Rover. So we got our other coolant line in today, our coolant pipe. Boom, just delivered literally as I was pulling into the driveway. So we got this to install, we've got the front outlet pipe to install, and we also have new gaskets for the intake manifold as well as the throttle body. So we're gonna start with the back coolant pipe, move to the front coolant pipe, and then do the gasket replacements. And cross fingers, we'll have a running, working Range Rover L322 that we could actually drive again. That'd be super nice. All right, let's get started. What we're gonna do today, we're actually gonna pull off that center piece. It's gonna be the two, I believe those are 13mm bolts here, and that whole piece is gonna slide out and give us plenty of room to get down to where we need to work. And then in that process, we are also going to remove this coolant line to start, the bleeder valve one. And the reason being is because it makes it a lot easier to kind of shimmy it out, and then you don't risk breaking anything else or any of that good stuff. So every other one I've seen, this is actually a plastic hose that has the potential to break worse. And then this plastic fitting here as well. But being that ours is aluminum, I'm a little less worried, but we do want to be careful because we don't want to snap that fitting off. That would be a bad day. All right, and boom, our access back here is night and day different. So yeah, it's crazy how much actual space that gives you. So let's go ahead and start moving the rest of this stuff out of the way. I don't think you need to undo all the electrical stuff in order to get to what we need to get to. I'm hoping that's the case, but I guess we'll see. All right, about 15 minutes later, I got one bolt down. Can't find my extension for my smaller ratchet wrench, so it's making it a little bit harder because it's so tight back there. And I used to have a tool that'd be perfect for this, and I have no idea where it is. So worst comes worst, might be making a Harbor Freight run for another one of those tools because it was like $7. Well worth it. It was a star tip with a ratchet on it, or a torque bit tip with a ratchet on it, and it was about that like wide, so you could fit it in places like that and just ratchet it out, and it was no problem. So might go pick one of those up. That was a legit struggle to get those first two bolts out, and I think that's the easier side to get to, if I'm not mistaken. So that was driver's side. I was able to get to it with a wrench and an extension, and the other side is the passenger side. I can't even see the bolts because they got that big stupid thing in the way that's on the piping. So this side is the side that I have off. This side is the side that I need to take off still. And the problem is that this thing right here, all of that is in the way to get to this in terms of visibility and reachability with a tool. So it might get a little interesting. We'll see what happens. I'm at 3 bolts now, and the last one is the one all the way to the passenger side. And I don't know if I have a tool to get to it. This might work, but I can't. I can't get to it. It is so tough to get to. My issue is like the holding yourself over the engine without trying to break anything. And in conjunction with lining up the tool, there's a bunch of shit in the way. And then actually getting this on the tool, or on the torque bit head, and trying not to strip it. So it's a balancing act, really not fun one at all. And I'm gonna keep working at it. I've got probably about another half hour to try and knock this bolt out before I gotta get going and run some errands. So wish me luck. All right, we're officially out with the first one. All right, so we're officially out with the rear pipe. This is the old, this is the new one. But here is the old pipe, and you can actually see right there is where we were leaking, but along the whole seam of this top side, you can see different areas in which you could tell it was failing and leaking. So good to know. Another thing too is it looked like it was actually leaking from this top part too, like it wasn't seating properly, but hard to say. So that's going to be it for probably right now. I might come back to this later tonight. But it is apart. We still got to pull this front crossover pipe still, but I'm not worried about that just at this second. So good stuff. That sucks. So that job sucked. That is an absolute, just from the removal alone, that was a 0 out of 10, would not recommend. It is easy enough where if you felt like not getting reamed for the prices of taking it to a shop, it is definitely doable. Just take your time and with the removal of it and everything, but it is a pain. So that's my honest take just so far, and we still have to put the new one in. I have no idea how we're gonna do that. So it's gonna be a struggle bus through and through. All right, so I went ahead and removed this front pipe. I think I did that the other day, but I pulled it out from the bottom side. Really easy to pull out. 3 T30 bolts hold it, 1 here, 2 down at the bottom where the pipe actually seats onto the block. And when I pulled mine out, and just to keep an eye out when you pull this out, and this is definitely bad. This is what the one I pulled out looks like. This is what the new one looks like. So I don't know if you could tell, but I'm missing my O-ring grooves, and they were stuck to the block still. So those were definitely bad, and a huge part of why this is probably leaking. And in conjunction with the rear leak, which is this one here, losing a good bit of coolant. So it was a matter of time before it was a really, really bad day. That being said, I'm going to start by reinstalling that front one, and then we're going to work on installing the rear one. So, here's another quick look at what the coolant pipe should look like. These should go on. These should go on like this. And that's what the O-ring recesses into, and the cap port, and that's just shearly broken off. So, all right, we got our new coolant pipe installed, fastened up. Both ends. Got our hoses reconnected back up. The reason why I wanted to get this one done first was when I'm working on the back side again, I'm not dropping anything in the coolant or anything. It's also making a huge mess having that side open because it kind of pours out of the front. So we're gonna start working on the rear one now. Hopefully it's not gonna be as big of a pain to get in as it was to get out, but I'm expecting it to be probably worse. So yeah, let's get that started. I went ahead and went back to the back side of the engine, and I pulled these out. And these were the old gaskets for this old, there's a cat. So those were the gaskets for that old one. When I went to go look at them again, I was just like, I don't know, I don't think that these are supposed to be here. So I went back there and peeled them off, and it turns out they were like melted or just stuck to the back side of the motor. So yeah, so I was able to peel them off, and then hopefully those ones will work. So these are a little bit beefier, but they're definitely just, they've seen better days. So yeah, that's gonna be next. All right, so we started by reconnecting this top rubber pipe. We also put in the other coolant pipe. You can see it sticking out there. It would be easier to attach while it was out of the truck than once it's in the truck, so because that could be kind of a bit of a pain. And then all we're gonna have to do is reconnect the electrical cord at the bottom, but we can do that once it's actually in, just because it's not hard to get to. So I'm now gonna climb in the truck, line this up, and try and get a couple screws on it so it won't move around. I'll probably do the 2 inside screws first, which is gonna be here and here. So that way it can at least get stationary, because the ones on the outside are way harder to reach, so this will be a little bit more of a pain. So let's try and get that in now. Fun fact, if you're climbing in and you're sitting inside the engine bay, I've been having my shin up against the top of the grill, and it's actually kind of bruising now from sitting for so long. So I'm throwing a towel up there. Hopefully that'll change it a little bit, and then I lean on the valve cover gasket and the battery tray, and sticking my hand on that towel kind of helps with the fatigue of sitting like that for long periods of time. One thing I didn't really take into account is because I don't have a garage, the sand and stuff is actually buffing up the bumper really bad right here. So I didn't really care too much about it, but just if you're really, really anal about your paint job. It's getting pretty hot out now. You see I'm sweating, but I got that rear pipe installed. Install time was about 10 minutes, whereas removal was about 45 minutes. It's much easier to reinstall. Yeah, so because you're able to kind of hand tighten most of those bolts up to the point where they need to get kind of tightened down. So that's installed. I got the front one installed. I'm going to make sure that all the coolant all the coolant lines are connected. Just do a quick run through on everything. And then I'm going to add coolant to the reservoir and try and bleed the system without turning the truck on as best I can to see if we can check for any leaks that might have popped up over the process of taking these in and out. So yeah, and then if everything checks out and looks good and there's no obvious signs of leakage right off the bat, then we'll put everything together and finish venting out the system, or bleeding out the system. Finish bleeding out the system. So if everything checks out, we'll get everything put back together and we'll bleed the system out, and hopefully that'll be the end of this ordeal. So. Another issue that we were having with the truck was low performance, and it wasn't throwing any codes, wasn't throwing any restricted performance or anything, so I knew it wasn't any major issue. It's just something wasn't perfect and it was causing the truck to not be perfect also. The coolant leak might have had something to do with that. The coolant leak also was getting on the belt, which was causing it to slip. So some of the power stuff was also relative to that issue as well. But I think one of the things that is definitely causing some of those performance issues is the intake manifold. And the reason why I say that is because I did remove it actually twice when I did the map sensor, and I didn't replace any of the gaskets. Part of that was just I didn't want to push a bunch of money onto it if we were just getting started. The other part of that too was the time issue, and the fact that it was just so frustrating that it was just trying to tackle one thing at a time. So now we're at it, getting the coolant lines fixed, doing a permanent temporary. I say permanent temporary because it's permanent because those are the new pipes, replaces the old crappy ones, so get another X amount of mileage out of it. But I say temporary because all those coolant pipes are only temporary. They only last about 60 to 100,000 miles. So if you haven't replaced them at 60 to 100,000 miles or every 60 to 100,000 mile interval, I highly recommend doing it. Pretty easy job yourself. If you want to take it to shop, cool, do it. But I would highly recommend it because when they do actually break, it becomes a huge problem. Anyways, back to this. So the intake manifold, I'm replacing the throttle body gasket and the manifold gaskets. And the reason for doing that is because if those leak by, you can get some poor performance because you're breaking the vacuum seal for the motor, or for the intake system. So you can see on some of these gaskets, you can actually see some oil blow by, as well on the gasket on the throttle body. First up, you have your throttle body gasket. It's this green gasket in front of us right here. And you can see on the outside here, all that oil residue, which means that you're getting air blowing by through there, and probably shouldn't have that much oil in the system, but that is not my main concern at the moment. But you can see, especially down here, you're getting a lot of oil blow by, which is probably a leak in the system. So that's one reason I'm replacing these ones. But then if you look at these gaskets as well, these are your actual intake manifold gaskets. A lot of oil residue on the outside of those. And it looks like it's kind of blown by on a couple, especially on these rear ones. These rear ones look really bad. So we're gonna go ahead and replace all those with brand new ones. So it's similar to an O-ring. These are gonna be pretty easy to pull out. We're just gonna take a like a pick, and we're just gonna try and pull one corner out like so, and just pull that out. You can actually hear and feel how just done that gasket is. They're almost like dry rotted. Oh yeah. So that's all there is to that. So we're gonna pull all these off. If we can. It's kind of hard to do with the camera in hand. Yep, we're gonna go and pull all these off and replace them with new ones. And same with this throttle body one. Point, you can get a pick in there and just peel it out like that. And once you get it out, just grab it. Yeah, you can see how dirty that gasket is. So dirty isn't always a sign of leaking, but that's a pretty telltale sign that we were leaking past right there and it was drying out. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and pull all those off and put the new ones on. All right, and just like that, we've got our new intake and throttle body gaskets reinstalled. So I'm gonna show you what one of these back gaskets looked like. And you can see where it's really dark brown is just oil. But also where that dark brown is where it's kind of burnt off, and it's actually really, really, like, it's not necessarily hard, but the rubber definitely has kind of lost its bounce. And Yeah, it wasn't sealing much. So these new ones, you can see in comparison how much of lip and how much actual sealing area that has now versus those, which were almost completely flush with the back side. So we're gonna go ahead, get this ready to go back in now. And that is how you replace your gaskets. And to install the new ones is literally just put these over top, press them in, and that's all there is to it. All right, so intake manifold is in, not fastened down yet. I did do the plug in the back. We also have our throttle body, which is installed, not plugged in yet. We're just making some good progress. All right, so 10 bolts are fastened down, and now we're going to start plugging all the vacuum lines back in and the fuel line back in, and then move on from there. I'm gonna start with this vacuum line because this one's easy. I'm gonna just clip in your PCV valve. Just pops in. We got this vacuum line breather. I'm just gonna pop in. And then we have our electrical for our map sensor. Boom. And throttle body. Boom. All right, so we got the wiring harness reattached to the back of the intake manifold that says 2 torque bits. I will say, before you even get started, if you do that back coolant line, go ahead and remove that centerpiece for the clean air filter. It makes a heck of a difference being able to get to even just those torque bolts, but also the back side of your intake manifold, and it gives you plenty of room to be able to move around and get to the back side without anything interfering. So big deal to get that out. All right, we are all back together now. Now we're gonna do my least favorite part and bleed the system. I hope this video helped anybody that did need to get those done. There's a video that's pretty decent for the rear one, and there's plenty out there for the front one. So this might not be the best like install video, but that's what I'm doing on the truck, so I'm gonna film it. So thanks for hanging out with me. I'm sure there'll be another clip after this as to whether this was a raging success or a terrible not success. So yeah. All right, so upon fixing everything, this coolant line decided to split. So now I've got to replace this part, which sucks a whole lot. Oh man, so that sucks. Yeah. Cranked everything up, was bleeding out the system, and I noticed that there was a bunch of coolant pouring out from the bottom. You can see it was dripping consistently, not like broken pipe consistent. But it was leaking. I can see that there's coolant residue here. There's a bunch of coolant all over the throttle body, and you can see, I don't know if you can really see, but down here where the other pulley is leaking, or is it's pretty wet down there too. So that being said, at least this coolant line is all the way on the top, but gosh, that is miserable. Whoever decided that putting cheap plastic all over the place instead of using just actual like silicone pipes and stuff that are actually easy to replace, make this really brittle stuff, you're an asshole. You're a real asshole. All right, this type of stuff is the stuff that scares me for taking something like this out in the middle of nowhere and camping and all that stuff, because this is a cheap, crappy, flimsy pipe, and they sit very stiff, and after a little while they dry out and they get stiffer, and then one day you hit the right bump and then boom, it's cracked and you're screwed, and you have to search for it and figure out what it is that's leaking, because there's 400 of them, and then you finally figure it out just to fix it, just for something else to break because you moved it when you replaced that other part. So I hate this thing. Anyways, that's it for today. Now I've got to find out how to get another coolant pipe. So